Hey everybody, Andrew here. I have an absolute beauty here to share with you. Now this came over from the fantastic people at Atmomixani, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think only Greek people can say that properly, but that's my attempt at it. Atmomixani, from Katerina and Michalis. And they're the two people behind Atmomixani. I was lucky enough to meet them over in Germany at the Dampfer Messe back in October. Fantastic people. And they'd be known to many people out there as the creators of this, the Nemesis. Now, the Nemesis only came out last March, so March of 2013, and it basically took the world by storm. And there are different versions of it. There's navy brass versions, there's stainless steel matte, I think there's polished versions of it, and then there's other versions which are being done, you know, with different mixtures of metals, you know, for the different rings. And then I think they're even doing anodized aluminium tubes for them now. So, you know, from little acorns do mighty oak trees grow, as they say, and that seems to be what's happening with this and with Atmomixani. And they really deserve it, because what they do is they produce fantastic mods. And certainly of my mods, my mechanical mods, my Nemesis is, you know, it's if not my favorite, it's certainly one of my very favorites. And it's its simplicity, it's the way it's made, it's all of those different things. But up until now, or up until recently, they had the 69 mod, and then they had this steam machine, and they had the Nemesis, but they didn't, you know, they were talking for quite a while about coming out with a Genesis Atomiser, which would, you know, give you lots of different options as to how you could actually use it. Because there are people using them, you know, with stainless steel mesh, with microcoils and cotton, with silica, with all sorts of different ways. So what they wanted to do was produce something which was basically, you know, as versatile as it could be. So it could be used for absolutely anything. So they took their time about it, as they were absolutely right to get it right. And this is what they have come up with here. This is called the dome. Now it's the upper part here, so let me just screw it off. It's this part here. Let's take the drip tip off as well, because that's not part of it, that's just one that I put onto it. But this is the unit itself. And as you see on the front of it, we have the Atmomixani train, and then on the back of it, we have the name, which is Dome. And in my case, it's number 100, which I love. So, very nice looking unit. Now you'll notice about it straight away that it doesn't have a 510 connector on it. The threads are actually here. And the reason for this is that this fits directly onto a Nemesis, but you can also get a version where it actually fits onto a 69 mod. So that's what you order. There's two versions of these. There's the matte stainless steel, like this one here, and I got this one because I have a matte stainless steel Nemesis, but they also have a polished one as well. So that's basically what it looks like there. And then what happens with that is that then screws directly onto the Nemesis, or the 69 mod. And you basically end up with what is essentially a hybrid, which looks fantastic. So if I put my drip tip back in and I show you the whole thing, that's what it looks like. And I think that looks the business now. It really is terrific. Now, I have a stainless steel mesh in this at the moment, and what I'll do is at the end of the video, I'm going to start doing this in future, I'll show you the actual item first, and then I'll do a build for it at the end. If I'm doing a build, it just means that any of you who know how to do all this stuff already, which is many of you, and many of you who know how to do some of these builds better than I know how to do them, you don't have to suffer watching it. You can go to the end. I'll do it. I'll show where it is within the chapter markers in the description down there. The description of the video, I'll give you a chapter marker, basically a link which will bring you straight to the part on how to build it. So it means you don't have to watch it if you don't want to. So this is a stainless steel mesh wick in it. It's got flat Canthal, and the Canthal is 0.5, 0.1, and it is, I think there's 4 wraps on it, and it is coming out at, I think, about 1.2, around that sort of 1.2 ohms, that kind of an area, I think. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that. I don't have a multimeter, and obviously, you know, with these things, because they don't have a 510 connector, you can't sort of put them into an ohm checker like that, and so you need a multimeter to read it, and I actually don't have one at the moment, so, well, not one that's working anyway. So, you know, it's a little bit of guesswork at the moment, but I think it's somewhere around that. I think 3 wraps usually brings you in at about 0.8, something like that. So 4 is around the, just over the 1 mark. So let's give it a go. You can see here there's air holes, and we'll talk about those when I go closer in on this thing, which I'll do shortly. But let's just see what it's like. It is absolutely gorgeous. Now, as I said, you know, I've given out about Genesis atomizers in the past because I just found them sort of quite difficult to use or whatever. In this particular case, and I think it's the case probably with most of the high-end Genesis atomizers, and possibly some of the lower-end ones as well. Once you actually get used to them, once you get used to putting a coil into them, they really are quite good. There's a lot of people would say that there's certain liquids that work much better on a stainless steel mesh wick like that than on silica, but likewise there are some liquids that would work better on a silica than they would on stainless steel. I mean, I think Grant's Vanilla Custard, which is one of the well-known sort of liquids out there, he doesn't recommend that they actually be used on stainless steel mesh, you know, but it's more a silica kind of a one. So in the end, it's up to you, but certainly it would appear as though some liquids just work better on these things. So let's give it another go. And it's so flavoursome. One of the issues I had in the past was I found, and maybe it was probably just the way I was actually making these coils, you know, that they were quite harsh in some cases. But in this particular case, I think this tastes great. Now, I'll just go up to the biggest hole, which is that one there. So all I have to do is actually just turn this thing here, you can see that. And that changes. You have a number of different air hole options. So we'll just go for the biggest one there and see what happens with this. And it's fantastic. And then I'll just go for one of these other ones. This is, I think, the smallest one. So we'll try this. It's a harder draw, and it's still brilliant. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to play around with these and decide which one is going to work best for me. There is a difference to all of them. But they're all bloody marvellous, frankly. And then there's another aspect to this, which again I'll show you when we go down close on it. And that is that at the top, you have a... I'll show it to you here if I can take the drip tip off. You can see that there's a little hole there in the top. And what that is if you want a hotter vape or a cooler vape. You'll see that right on the front there's a little sort of notch, and what that does is that lines up with the hole that is underneath there. Okay, so basically where that notch is, you know that the hole at the top there is behind it. So what you can then do is line that up relative to your wick and your air holes, and by doing that you can essentially affect the sort of the heat, if you like, of the vape, because if that hole is directly above the mesh and the coil, then you know it's going to be at its hottest. But if you want to actually turn that away from it, it's going to cool the vape down. So I've just turned that around now so that it's kind of over here in relation to it. And it cools it down. It means it's not quite as hard. It sort of actually smoothens it out a little bit. So again, I think what we've got here is we've got an atomizer which essentially you can make so many changes to it that you can end up with exactly what is your perfect place. And I think that in itself is a great achievement, to be able to give something to somebody where, because everybody has a different view on what is right, what they want to taste, how they want to taste it. And to give them an option like this, where you've got so many different ways of doing it, both from the heat, from the air flow, from the type of wick you put into it, it's just sort of the ultimate sort of versatility, really. So I think it's terrific. Really, really good. So let's go down close and I'll sort of take it apart so you can see what all the various different bits are. So I didn't show you before, but here is the lovely bag that it comes in, a lovely material little pouch with a bejeweled little button on the front of it, and the Atmomixani logo there, the train, which also appears engraved on the actual dome itself. And so here are all of the elements. Now I've broken it down as much as I can. I could probably go a little bit further, but I'm not going to. You really wouldn't need to go much further than what I've done here. I'm not going to take the O-rings off either because, yeah, you'll be able to see where they are, and that's that. So top part here, basically that's the cap at the top, which also acts as a sort of a cooling system or a temperature system, if you like. So this basically you can regulate the temperature of the vapor coming out. This and this form the sort of the top cap, if you like. This and this, these are both tanks. You can either use a glass tank, which I would tend to do, or we've also got a stainless steel tank. This is the base here. This here is the bit that does all the work, where all of these smaller little elements actually fit into. This here sits on this post here, and this at the bottom here slides into the base here. And then this is the piece that's holding it all together here. And then this brass part here is a tool that you can use for these little insulators here. So that's essentially what all the bits are. And really the easiest way to show how they all work and how it goes together is to actually put it together. So that's what I'll do now. And we'll do it bit by bit. Right, the first thing I want to do is basically put the pin into the bottom part here. So what we do is essentially that just goes in there. This is silver plated pin. Now it needs to go in, as ever with these things, you need to put it in so that it's reasonably tight, but don't over tighten stuff. So that should be enough to do it there. Then our next part, in fact, what I'll do is I'll just get myself a little pliers just to tighten it up, if I can find one to hand. Okay, now again, just really gently, because, and that's enough there. So that's that. The next thing to go on is this part here, But at the bottom you would want to put in, you see this little O-ring here? That basically slots down, and you can see at the bottom there, there's a well, a little well that is actually just popped into. So that needs to go in there, so just make sure that that's seated correctly in there. Then basically, and you can see on this here as well that this has got O-rings, because this is taking the bottom part of the tank when the tank slides in over it. So this basically screws down into place at the bottom till it screws no more, and that's just about right. Now as you can see, there's a gap at the side there. That gap is where the tank is actually going to slide in over that, and then that will sit on the O-rings which are going around this central piece here. So that's how that works there. Next thing to go on is this, but before we do this, what we need to do is basically put in the little insulators in place here. So let's go a little bit closer, move this stuff out of the way, and put them in. Okay, now you saw these earlier on. These are little insulators, and these will be going into these holes here. Okay, so these bigger holes. Now, there are two sizes. There's one which is slightly bigger than the other. I'm going to use the bigger ones, and essentially what I'll be doing is putting those into each of these holes. Now to do that, they give you this little brass tool here, and essentially what happens is you pop this onto the end and then you shove it into the hole there, and that makes sure that it goes in properly and is seated correctly. Now when you do put these in, you'll see that at one end there's a slight little sort of flange. That's the bit that goes down to the bottom on this little tool. So again, if you look at it, I don't know whether you'll be able to see it on that, the shape of these things is they're slightly wedge shaped. So the thinner part is going to be the leading edge actually going in. Okay, so what we can do is, and let me just show you this first of all. There's, just cleaned it out earlier on, so there's a little bit of liquid in it. That is the top, and you see you've got different pieces at in different places on it. Now, again, this is part of the versatility of the whole thing. You know, it's up to you how you want to actually set it up. But the thing that is for sure is that these little insulators go into the big holes that are in there. Okay, so I'm just going to basically put in, from this side here, I'm going to put in the big ones, because they're the ones that I want to use. So essentially you put it onto the tool like that, you pop it inside, so that you can see it like that, and then basically just push it into place. And you can see that the insulator is now in place. So all I need to do is just repeat that for the other ones. And again, depending on what your setup is, how you want to actually go about it, if you want a bigger hole or a smaller hole, you just put in whichever size insulator that you want. Okay, so second one in place there. Let's see, okay, the third one. If I can find where it's meant to go, that'll do. So that is now in place there. And then we put in the fourth one. And where are we now? It's this particular hole here. So you can see it there. And then basically just, usually it's just easiest just to turn it over and push it down like that. So that means now that we have all of our insulators in place. That's from the reverse side, and that's from the top side. Okay, so that's that. And I can put my smaller little ones over to the side and back into the bag where they're going to live. Okay, we could put the screws on at this stage, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to sight this onto the unit itself, onto the central post. Just twist that on like that. Okay. Now, the next thing, and the bit that holds all of this together, is this piece here. Okay. So this basically needs to screw on to this. And then again, just very gently, just give it a bit of a turn just to make sure that it's held nice and firmly in place. Now going into the top of that, we want to put in this little screw, because that's essentially the screw which is going to be used to trap the wire when you are making your coil and you're putting the top wire in over the positive post in the middle. So that's now in place there. So what that does is that leaves us with 3 other screws. If I can show them to you. Okay, so here are the 3 screws. These 2 are identical to each other. This one here is a little bit different. And this one here can actually be used as an air control, right? So it will, let's just open it up here so you can see what's going on. You can see that that is actually hollow. At the side it's got a little hole there. And then this actually goes into the top. So that if you have that opened up, that's actually going to let some air through it. If you close it up, it's obviously not going to let any air through it at all. Now, in some builds, and if you look at Navy Lifeguard's video, he actually does a microcoil for this, and you can see that he uses this little hole here as a point to actually put his wire into. So it can be used for that as well. Now I'm not going to go into that, but if you look up Navy Lifeguard on YouTube, you'll see how he's actually done that. And it's a clever use of this, you know, because it's such a versatile unit all in. There's so many different things you can do. So after that, then it's a case of all of these screws need to go back into the little screw holes. Now where you place them and how you do them is up to yourself. And again, probably, you know, you're going to find whatever is the most suitable method for you, you know, and what it is that you're trying to achieve. So let's put that one in there. And then into the third one here, we'll pop this one in here. So we have all of those nicely in place now. So I have, the next pieces are these little bits here. And these are little plugs, essentially, that go into the holes that we have here. So depending on what your setup is, you might be putting in a Wick, you know, I mean, there's all sorts of different ways you could do. It might be dual coils that you're actually putting in which case you might be putting them in side by side there. There's lots of different ways of actually doing this. But essentially what you get is 3 of these plugs to basically plug up the holes that you're not using if you're only using a single hole, you know, as I would be showing you for a single sort of mesh wick. So in this particular case, what I want to do is basically just pop these in. So there's one in there. Pop another one in here. And then what I would typically be doing is I would be using this hole here. But again, it's entirely up to yourself. I could be using this hole here and this post, or this hole here and this particular post here, or this screw here. So it's entirely up to yourself. And then we can pop, say, that one in there. Now, also another handy thing is that when you're actually working on these, you can actually lift these out to give you room, you know, so that you've got more room for when you're actually putting your wire around or whatever, and that can be really, really handy. In a case like that, you know, what you could do is actually have your wick coming up here and then tie your wire underneath here, and then obviously the other part of the wire attaches onto the middle there. Or let's see, what other variations are there? There's loads of them, frankly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's entirely up to you, because in some cases you're going to have more room on one side than on the other side. So, you know, depending on what it is that you're putting in, how wide it is, etc., etc. Because obviously you want to make sure that whatever you put in is sort of isolated and on its own. It's not going to be touching off everything, because otherwise you'll get a short. So it's entirely up to you how you want to actually do that. But as I said, you know, later on in the video, if you want to look at it, you can see how I do a mesh coil, and you can see how I've actually set that up. So that's that there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the glass tank, which is, let me just put a little bit of liquid on it. So just a small bit. It's just to sort of help lubricate it as it's actually going over the O-rings. So just put it on like that there. And essentially what all you're doing is that this is sliding over and then pushing down, and then what you need to do is make sure that this pushes down to the bottom O-ring here. Okay, so you'll get a click. There we go. That is now clicked into place. Okay, so it is in line with this bottom one here. And that means that it's now been pushed fully into the bottom here. So that's how you want that. Okay. Right, so our next piece to put together is this, and as you can see you've got holes on both sides of this, and this is essentially your airflow. Now, when we look at it, we can see here we've got one hole here, which is 1.8. We've got two single holes here, which are both 1 millimeter, and then we've got another hole here, which is 1.5. Okay, so with this sleeve here, when you actually go over it, if you put the big hole over the big hole like that, that is 1.8. If you put the big hole over the second biggest hole here, obviously the airflow is going to be, you know, that of the smaller diameter hole, which in this case is 1.5. So you put that over there like that, and you've got 1.5. You have then got, if we take these two single holes here and slot them over the two single holes there, we have got two single 1 mil holes. So that's 2 mils, essentially what you've got there. Okay. And then where it gets kind of a little bit smart is if you put it, so you've got the 2 holes here and you've got the 1 hole here, and if you slide that over, essentially what you've got is 2 1 mil holes side by side. And those 2 1 mil holes side by side is if you were putting say dual coils into this, and say you're and maybe you're using, let me just take these out for the moment so we can sort of show you what I mean. So if you had dual coils in here on these two, and obviously what you always want to do is have your air holes just in front of your coils, that as you can see you've got the dual coils there and we've got 2 1 mil holes there, so that when you slide that on, essentially what you're going to get is you're going to get an air hole for each of the side-by-side dual coils. Okay, so that's how that thing works there. Now obviously with this, and we'll just shove it into place, to change your air holes all you need to do is rotate this. Okay, so, and by rotating that you get all your different combinations. So you can see them there all happening as it goes through, which again, it just makes this thing so versatile. So that's your airflow. Now what I'll do is I'll just put these pins back, and what you need to do is be careful of these pins, because I have managed to already lose one of them just by me being a feckin' idiot. I ended up deciding to clean my desk off at a really bad time, at a time where one of these was not back in place. So if you're not using them, put them into the bag or something, but don't leave them hanging around, because they're quite small, and the last thing you want to do is actually lose one of them. Now, one thing that I have found is that when you actually put the tank on, it is really, really difficult to get it back off again. So what I have found is the best way to actually get it back off again is to undo the center post. Because the thing is, this is slotting into, at the bottom here, into these pieces, into the O-rings. And it's just really hard to get a grip on it. And because it's glass, you don't want to sort of pull it too hard, because if you do, then you might break it. So what I have been doing is actually undoing the center part, taking off the top there and taking it out that way, because I just want to make sure that I don't actually break the glass. So let's do that quickly so that we can take off the glass tank and put on the metal tank, so you can see what that looks like. So just a little turn there, get this center part off here, and then once I've done that, I can start to unscrew the top. Once I've done that, then it's obviously much easier to take the tank off. So that would be my tip anyway, as far as taking the tanks off are concerned. So here is the other option that we have. And so let's just slide this on and see what it looks like. Again, it just clicks into place. This then goes on here. Screw that into place. And just for the purposes, well, no, hang on a second, I better do this properly. This essentially then goes on to the middle there. And tighten that up, obviously just use little pliers to tighten it up. And then we have our little screw in the middle. That goes in there. And then we can slide this on there. And if I've got a little cloth somewhere just to clean it up a bit, because there's some liquid on that, I can show you what it looks like. There it is there, and that's with the metal tank in place, which in this case is polished. It's a polished metal tank piece that actually goes onto it. And again, there's our airflow there. It looks very, very smart, I think. So, next thing is the cap. Here's the cap. As I mentioned earlier on, with this cap here, there's a little hole at the top. You can see it there at the bottom. Now, if you look at where the hole is, which is there, and then look at the side here, you'll see that there's a little sort of dimple or a little indentation on the side. So that's an indicator for you as to where that hole is within this, okay? Now, if you have your airflow set for a certain part, say there, and you will have done that on the basis that inside you've got your coil in line with that, okay? Then that means that if you put on this cap here with that little dimple in line with this, then that means that hole there is lining up with your coil that's inside. So if you then pop that on like that, then that means that everything is in line. So the hole within the top is in line with the air hole, which is in line with the coil which is underneath it. Now, that means that that hole there is going to be over the top of your coil. That also means then that that's going to give you the warmest vape based on, you know, how hot the coil is actually going and the vapor that's coming off it. Okay. Now, if you turn this, and the easiest way to do that, and I'll just put a drip tip into this here. If you then turn that, let's keep this in place here. If you then turn that away, like I'm doing there, again, you've still got this in line with your coil that's inside, but now you've got this turned away from it somewhat, you can turn it right around to the other side if you want, that is going to cool the vapour that's coming out, because essentially it means now that the vapour is having to sort of, it's not coming straight up into the drip tip, it's actually having to work its way around the chamber to come up. So what that does is, it seems to me, for me anyway, it certainly does cool down the vapour a bit, but it also seems to smoothen it out a little bit. So sometimes with, you know, stainless steel mesh wicks, I find anyway, it can be a little bit harsh, you know, what comes off it. But by actually turning this thing around, not only does it cool it down a little bit, cool the vapour down, it also seems to, you know, soften out the vapour a little bit. It just makes it slightly less harsh. So again, I think that's a great innovation and a great idea. So, you know, I think when you look at this in total and all the different elements to it, and again, another big, nice lump of steel there, really good O-rings on it. And we look at the whole package here. I'm not sure that there's anything else out there that's as versatile as this. Now, I wouldn't be a big expert on Genesis atomizers at all, as I'm sure you probably know. But I just think that if you're getting into the whole Genesis atomizer thing, something like this is a great way to start. Now, you do need a Nemesis or a 69 mod because of the connection at the bottom, but it just means that you can experiment to your heart's content and get yourself whatever is your perfect vape. So that's it. That's all I can say about it up close, really, other than the fact that it is just an extremely well made piece. Very, very durable. As I said, this is with the steel tank on it. Normally I would have it with this glass tank on it. Okay, so here it is, back together again. And so, conclusion, what do I think of it? Without wanting to really repeat myself, which is something which I tend to do quite often, I think that this is bringing me back to Genesis. I think that there is enough versatility within this, as I've shown you all the different options that are there. I think there's enough versatility in this that allows me to basically get exactly what I want to get in terms of a vape. Once I get a stainless steel mesh coil into this thing and get it working properly, which has always been one of my issues in the past, but you know, this time I really didn't find it that difficult to do. And I know that that mesh wick is going to stay in there for quite a while. Once I've got that working, I've then got, you know, the ability to make this do whatever it is that I want it to do. I think it looks fantastic. I mean, I really do. I love the look of the whole thing. I love the sort of the hybrid feel to it. As I showed you earlier on, you've got your metal sort of insert here if you don't want to use the glass one, which again just looks really terrific on it. I would always tend to use glass because I want to see how much liquid I have left. But yeah, I think that this is bringing me back to Genesis. This is something that I am going to continue using, and I'm going to use a lot, and I can see myself using this way into the future. I can also see myself trying all sorts of other types of coils within it, like U-wicks, and I mean, I've got a U-wick here ready to go into it, which I'll put in. I've already tried in it a microcoil with cotton, which works absolutely fantastically well. So I think I've got, you know, I've got the perfect atomizer here to be able to do whatever it is I want to do in the future, and, you know, have a bit of fun experimenting, because after all, I think once you get into the whole Genesis atomizer thing, once you get into sort of, you know, atomizers in general, part of the whole thing is it's a bit of a hobby, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of trying to find what the perfect vape is. And if like me, you're one of those people who's always trying to get the best flavor, the best vapor, you know, the best that you possibly can out of an atomizer. Then with an atomizer like this, the Dome, you have every option that you could possibly imagine available to you. The price, €150. Do I think it's worth it? The answer is yes, I do think it's worth it. You will have seen, you know, when I took it all apart, there's lots of bits in there. There's a lot of engineering in this. This isn't just something which is just being sort of, you know, a load of bits sort of produced by, you know, massive machines spat out in the tens of thousands. This is something which has been, there's a lot of work has gone into it, both in terms of the design, but also a lot of work in terms of, you know, the quality of it and everything like that. So for €150, well, given the fact that you'll have it probably for the rest of your life, I think it's a very, very good price. And then if you happen to have a Nemesis or a 69, which frankly you need to be able to use it because it screws straight into the actual, into the battery tube, then, you know, as a companion set, as a sort of a complete look, I don't think that there's anything much nicer than what's going on there. It just does it for me, and it does it for me in a really, really good way. So that's it. Atmomixani, the Dome, absolutely fantastic. I would 100% recommend it. Really one of the nicest things that I've come across. Yeah, I've got the wherever, and I never ever know. One day I'll learn what side I have it on, but the address is up there. So, you know, I think what they're doing, and it tends to happen, you know, with the Nemesis and with other pieces that they have, they release them in batches. So, you know, if you go onto the website, you'll probably see when the next batch is coming out. Also, they have Facebook pages where I think they announce when the next batches are coming out. And what tends to be then is that you basically, you go in on a certain day, they'll release at a certain time, and you go in, and if you're lucky, you know, basically you just wait until the time comes for them to release them, and then hopefully you'll be able to put one in your cart, and you'll have it winging its way to you from Greece shortly thereafter. They do that reasonably frequently as well. So, you know, it's not like some of these things that are out there where you have to wait months and months on end. It's not like that at all. But either way, even if there's a little bit of a wait on it, I think it's well worth waiting for. So that's it. Nothing more to say other than the fact that I think the Dome is a fantastic atomizer, and it is bringing me back into the Genesis fold. So congratulations to them, and catch you again soon. Cheers! Okay, let's see if we can put a coil together for the Dome. Now, what I'm going to do in this particular case is I'm going to use some stainless steel mesh, which we have here, and I'm going to use some flat Cantal this time. I just find it easier when doing these particular mesh coils, because it sort of sits, because of the nature of it. And if we can pick it up here, see if I can show it to you. It's basically, it's flat, and that is not going into focus no matter what I do with it. Come on. No. Anyway, it's flat. You'll see it shortly. And it just means that it sort of sits, you know, there's a bigger area sitting against the actual mesh. So it just seems to work quite well. Now this particular one that I'm using is this here, which is 0.5, 0.1 Cantal D. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's get the bits out of the way that we don't actually need. Now, normally if I'm building a coil of some sort, I'll use something like this. This came from Steam Pipes. .de, fantastic little stand, but obviously in this case it won't fit in because there's no 510 connection, because this is made to go directly onto the Nemesis, or there's another version that goes on to the 69. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as the base for it so that I can build it on, but I have taken out the battery because I don't know how many times I've burnt myself and electrocuted myself and everything by forgetting to lock this thing off. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to use this as the base to hold it. Now, in this particular case, I'm using this hole here, and this has got one of the larger inserts in it. But the mesh that I have, it basically fits nicely in there. So there's enough room for it to move around. It's not sort of, you know, tightly in it. So that should be good enough for me. Now, the other thing that I am going to do, some people do it, some people don't. For me, because I'm a little bit of an amateur when it comes to making these sort of coils, what I'll do is I'll just use a little syringe top, which I will put down into the center of it, so that means that when I actually place it in, then you've got something a little bit harder. You know, it's not going to be bending all over the place. It just makes it a little bit easier to sort of control it. So that's how I'm going to be managing that particular part. So let's go in a little bit closer. Now, again, for me, and everybody has their own way of doing these things, I would prefer to actually wrap the canthal around the wick beforehand, not while it's actually on the unit, because I just find it's easier to do that. So that's what I'm going to do in this case. So let's see if we can go in close here. Now, by the way, in relation to this stainless steel mesh here, I think this is 400 mesh, this particular one. It has been oxidized and then it's been rolled up. The size of this is I think about 35 high at the moment, so that way there is 35 millimeters. You don't actually need as much as that. I think probably 30 is enough, because essentially what you want is it to sort of touch down at the bottom here, or close to the bottom, and in this case it can touch at the bottom because it's insulated, and then you don't want it really going any higher than this top part here. So it's to basically be sitting up at about the same height as this here. So about 30 should do that, but it's better just to give it a bit of extra, and then once you've actually got it in place, then you can actually cut it down so that it's in line with it. On this mesh again, I think lengthwise I did it, it was about maybe 45 long, so then when I rolled it up, it gave me that sort of a diameter there. Now you'll also possibly see at the end there that there's a little kind of a lip at the end just there. That is the leading edge here. I actually folded over, so it just means that then on your leading edge, if we can see it, where the hell is it? There it is there, the leading edge coming along there. It just means that you've got no single little bits, you know, of mesh sticking off. It just makes it nice and clean. So that's why we do it that way. So here's the canthal, which as I said earlier on was flat, and I couldn't really show it to you because it wouldn't stay in focus. That's what it is now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put 4 wraps onto this. Now 4 wraps should be giving me around sort of 1.1, 1.2, around that kind of level, maybe a little bit higher. But that's where I'm going for on this one. So let's just wrap it first. And it doesn't really matter where on the mesh you actually wrap it, because we can sort that out afterwards, okay, because we can slide it up and down on it. So what we'll do is we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, we'll undo the top one there, and then we'll just put maybe one more on here, so that'll give us our 4. And that's what we're looking like there. Now that's not really tight on it, so it means it can be slid up and down on it, and that means that we can then sort of position things easily enough. The other thing that I would tend to do with the flat canthal is once I've got that done, I'll actually give it a little twist at the end, because when you're actually catching these underneath the screws, it's easier if you're catching them on the flat side rather than on the upright side, and maybe I'll be able to show you that in a second. And again, that's just my particular way of doing it. I'm sure there's lots of people do it in different ways than me. Right, what we want to do is now slot this into this particular hole here, so we can push this in there like that. Then just basically shove this down a bit here so that it's in the right, it's pushing down towards the bottom here. Now you can see that we've got one lead ready to go underneath this one here, and then the other one is actually going to be going back around this one here. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get our first one right. So I'm going to just turn that around in there, and then we'll tighten this up. Again, don't want to tighten it up too much at the moment, just want to get it sort of held in position. So that should do us there. So that's the first one held underneath. Now what I need to do is with this other one is basically pull it around so that it goes in under the top here. So let's just get that turned in like that. Actually, I need to undo this a little bit more. So you can see that's now hooked in underneath that side there. And again, it's easier if you just actually have it twisted slightly so you've got the flat side coming in. It's not always easy to do, but let's see. That may or may not be right. We'll give it a go. So again, I want to just tighten that up. But again, in tightening it up, I don't want it to pull too much of the wire in. I don't want it to drag the whole thing in on itself. So I think that should be just about right there. So if we get these things out of the way, cut the legs off, and then we can start tidying it up a little bit. So I'll get that one off there, and then we can take this little baby out there, and then we can, I'm going to just snip this one off because I don't want to jiggle it and undo everything. So again, that should be just about okay there. So that is what we are left with. Now what we need to do is just try and sort of clean these up a little bit, just get them a little bit more evenly spread. So let's do that. Just move them around a little bit. In fact, what I might do is I might just pop this thing back in. Again, it just gives it that little bit of rigidity while you're actually working on it. So let's just move these around just a little bit there, just to get them nice and even. I think that's looking reasonably okay at the moment. So we're live now, so here's the moment of truth, and this is where things tend to go sort of wrong for me, but let's see what happens. So the best thing as ever with these, when you actually start one off, is you want to basically pulse it. You know, don't just push the thing down, because you'll probably end up snapping a wire off it. So if we just start to pulse it, okay, see, oh, there's a bit of smoke coming off at the beginning there. Now there seems to be a hot spot going on in there somewhere. Now let's just keep this going for a bit. Now what I'll do is I'll fast forward and we'll just let this thing do its job. Essentially what you need to do is just keep pulsing it, and eventually the whole thing will start to glow evenly. Right, here we go. If we have a look at it now, we can see that there's no hot spots. Everything is glowing perfectly evenly there. So I'm quite happy with that. And I think one of the key things is, when you're actually making these, is patience. You need to take your time on it. You need to spend a bit of time, you know, sort of pulsing it and just making sure that everything is even. And, you know, if you've got hot spots, then what you'll do is you'll move the wires up and down just a little bit, you know, and it's a fraction of a millimeter sometimes is all that's actually required to you know, to get it working properly. Just before testing it and seeing how it works, obviously I'd said earlier on that when I put the wick into it, the mesh wick, that it was too long, which it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it off so that it's basically in line with the top, with that top thing there. So let's do that now. Just cut it off like that. And then what we can do is just pinch this back. Now I've got something to pinch it because this thing is still hot. Just pinch it back so that it's not all... so if we can do it this way here. Yeah, just to get it back basically into its sort of roundish shape. Now let's see if in doing that I've affected the coils at all. Hopefully not. No, we seem to be still going okay. So that should be good. And I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll just put a little bit of liquid on it now. And we'll see what happens. And then I'll fill it up. So we'll just put a little bit of liquid on the top here. Okay, so I've just wetted that down a bit. Oh, look at Janie Mac. I think it's safe to assume that this thing is doing what it's meant to do. Let's just put a little bit more liquid on it here. Okay, ready for the fireworks?